All right, continuing on in Genesis chapter 1, now on to verses 3 to 5. We'll see what's happening there and compare that to evolutionary versus creationism points of view, models. All right, Genesis chapter 1, verses 3 to 5. Move on down to 3 to 5. We've covered a lot here, but there's a lot in this chapter. We've only gone through 2 verses. The day equals age theory refuted. And we're looking at Exodus 20, 8 to 11. Some insights there. Exodus 20, 8 to 11 refers to 24-hour creation days. The word day in the creation account of Genesis is the same word translated day in Exodus, because here's what it says. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the 7th day is the Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work. And then it goes back to creation. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth. Well, how long were those days? He made the earth, the sea, and all that is in them. But he rested on the 7th day. Okay, how long were those days? Well, therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Let's go back. 6 days you shall labor. These days, million-year-old days, we don't live that long. And do all your work. But the 7th day is a Sabbath, a rest to the Lord your God, is set aside to worship him. On it you shall not do any work. So don't do any work for the 7th day. Well, that has to be a 24-hour day, obviously. These verses in Exodus confirm the literal 24-hour day time period of creation. Otherwise, the understanding of the 4th commandment quoted above could not be for Jews to rest for a day, but for millions of years. Furthermore, at the conclusion of each day's creation is a statement the same or similar to, then there was evening and morning the first day, indicating a literal 24-hour day with an evening and a morning. So let's dispense with combining passages that don't have similar contexts and say, well, a day is like 1,000 years to the Lord. Well, yeah, but what's the day to the Jews who are requested or commanded to rest on the 7th day? It has to be a 24-hour day. So now the day equals age theory contradicts geological age theory, which it falsely attempts to support. Christians try to do that in the past to agree with what they thought science taught. That wasn't science, it was a model. It wasn't proved out. So they said, well, okay, let's combine the two and say that Christianity supports evolution. Well, the geological theory of ages, the accepted order of fossils in the rocks, does not coincide with the sequence of the Genesis 1 narrative if the days are to be taken as ages. The Genesis account has the following creation sequence. Heavens, space and earth in its formless stage. Light, firmament, expanse, the heavenly space above earth. Dry ground and seas. We move on to plant life, stars and planets, day and night, water animals and fish and birds, land animals, Adam and Eve. Now, see, the day equals age theory would not enable life on earth to survive. Dr. Boss says a repetitive phrase given again and again in the creation account in Scripture is the evening and the morning. So creation days are literal 24-hour days. The word yom is used in the Hebrew. Unless there is a specific contextual arrangement, it always means a literal day. The reason the days of creation had to be literal is because of the interrelationship of life. Plant, insect, animal life, and non-living elements of nature, such as light, rain, air, and so on, are interdependent upon one another, such that they need to be in creation at the same time for one another to survive. And it was on day number 3 that God created the botanical life forms. It was not until day number 4 that God created the stellar heavens, the sun and the moon, to create the ability for photosynthesis. If the earth were enshrouded in a dark cloud of darkness, there would not have been the ability for photosynthesis until the sun and more of the stellar heavens were visible and usable as light sources. Those days are millions of years old. You got plants that are going to die. In a matter of 48 hours, most of the botanical life forms would be dead. In a matter of 28 days, all of them would be dead without the ability designed by the Lord that the stellar bodies give the photosynthesis upon the earth. Even if that were not the case, it was not until day number 6 that God created the insects that are so important to the procreation of most of these botanical life forms. There is such an interplay of the life forms that the days of creation have to be literal 24-hour days. And again, the day equals age theory contradicts the Bible's teaching that death followed sin and did not come before it. Dr. Henry Morris states, the day age theory accepts as real the existence of death before sin in direct contradiction to the biblical teaching that death is a divine judgment on man's dominion because of man's sin. Thus, it assumes that suffering and death comprise an integral part of God's work of creating and preparing the world for man, and this is in effect pictures God as a sadistic ogre and not as the biblical God of grace and love. We got a problem there. And in the phrase, let there be, it signifies something which has just been created where there was nothing like it before. So we look at Genesis 1:3-5. Let there be light, and there was light. So the light was good. God separated the light from the darkness, and God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning the first day. So James Stanford states, throughout the Genesis 1 narrative, God speaks and something happens as a result. These commands are characterized by the wording, let there be. One such command appears in verse 3, light. 2 in verse 6, expanse and divided waters. 2 in verse 9, waters gathered in appearance of dry ground. 1 in verse 11, sprouting plants, and 1 in verse 14, luminaries. 2 in verse 20, sea creatures and flying animals, and 1 in verse 24, land animals. Then 1 in verse 26, man. All, with the exception of 1, are used in the sense of God speaking to his creation. In the exception, one gets the sense of one member of the Godhead speaking to the others. Let us make man. This command, let there be, is known as a Joseph command, or Joseph command mood. God used this command consistently in the first 6 instances to refer to something brought into existence that did not previously exist. Regardless of whether these commands signify ex nihilo, out of nothing, or de novo, something new, they represent a fundamental change in the object that is created. This includes the sun, moon, and stars in the 4th day. So we don't have matter versus antimatter existing and canceling each other out, and then something occurred, and creation occurred, and there was some kind of appearance of waters, sea creatures, flying animals. Let us make man. So there's no matter-antimatter involved here. Now, God creates light, and the earth experienced evening and morning for the first time without light emanating bodies. Interesting. Thermonuclear fusion reactions begin, forming heavier nuclei from lighter ones and liberating huge amounts of energy. As a consequence, an intense light illuminates the interior, breaking through to the surface and ending the darkness there. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. So as the nuclear compression continues, gravity becomes so strong that light can no longer reach the surface, redarkening it. Psalm 104:2, covering thyself with light as with a cloak, in context appears to refer to day 1. This suggests to me, Dr. Humphreys, that at this point the Spirit of God moving or hovering over the surface of the waters becomes a light source, in the same way as he will again become a light source at a future time, Revelation 21:23 and 22:5. This would give the deep a bright side and a dark side, thus dividing light from darkness and inscribing a circle on the face of the waters at the boundary of light and darkness. We have in verse 5, and God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning the first day. So the deep speeds up its rotation. as the compression continues. As a whirling ice skater speeds up when she brings her arms inward, we can also imagine a reference point on the surface rotating around to the dark side and continuing farther around to the bright side again, marking off evening and morning. Rough calculations show that all of the events from the beginning to this point had to take place in a very short time, much less than a year. So to calculate the time exactly would go beyond the frontiers of modern relativity, but Dr. Humphrey suspects that a modern clock, if it could survive on the surface of the deep, would register about 24 hours from the instant of creation to the end of day 1. Verse 3 is the first record of God speaking in the Bible. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Henry Morris says this: the Word of God brings light. Before he created the sun, stars, and moon, out of nothing. Psalm 33, 6 and 9. By the word of the Lord the heavens were made, and by the breath of his mouth all their host. For he spoke, and it was done. He commanded, and it stood fast. So what part of create out of nothing do you get out of this? Everything. When light appeared, God divided the light from the darkness. Darkness was not removed completely, so far as the earth was concerned, but only separated from the light. Having separated the day and night, God had completed his first day's work. It's got to be 24-hour days. It's because it's communicating this to mankind for the knowledge of how God created the heavens and the earth. So the evening and the morning were the first day. This same formula is used at the conclusion of each of the 6 days. So it is obvious that the duration of each of the days, including the first, was the same. It is clear that beginning with the first day and continuing thereafter, there was established a cyclical succession of days and nights, periods of light and periods of darkness. Now, such a cyclical light-dark arrangement clearly means that the earth was now rotating on its axis, and that there was a source of light on one side of the earth corresponding to the sun, even though the sun was not yet made. Genesis 1:16. It is equally clear that the length of such days could only have been that of a normal solar day. Returning to the significance of light as created, it is obvious that visible light is primarily meant, since it was set in contrast to darkness. At the same time, the presence of visible light waves necessarily involves the entire electromagnetic spectrum. Beyond the visible light waves are, on the other hand, ultraviolet light and all the other short wavelength radiations, and, on the other hand, infrared light and all the other long wave phenomena. In turn, setting the electromagnetic forces into operation in effect completed the energizing of the physical cosmos. All the types of force and energy which interact in the universe involve only electromagnetic, gravitational, and nuclear forces, and all of these have now been activated. Recall that the physical laws governing the universe were considerably changed as a result of the fall and later the flood. Genesis 2, 16-17, and 3, 14-19, which might very well have included these governing light. For light will indeed be of a different character in eternity future, perhaps as they govern light at creation. Here's Isaiah 60, 19-20. No longer will you have the sun for light by day. This is the new heavens and the new earth. Nor for brightness will the moon give you light. But you will have the Lord for an everlasting life, and your God for your glory. Your sun will set no more, neither will your moon wane, for you have the Lord for an everlasting life, and the days of your mourning will be finished. All of this was accomplished on the first day of creation and for eternity in the future. The physical universe has been created and energized and was ready for further shaping and furnishing in preparation for man, whose dominion it would be. Compare Psalm 115:16. The highest heavens belong to the Lord, but the earth he has given to man. And we can begin again. When angels were created,